Hello everyone, it's the Peregr1ne here and welcome to another episode of Peregr1ne Talks. In this episode we will be discussing archer balance both for Mordhau and for potential future slasher titles. Now if you're one of those people who think archery should not be a part of these games at all, and if you're one of those people that thinks that archery is always easy because point and click, you'd best keep quiet because you don't know what you're talking about. However, there is nothing wrong with thinking that range needs to be balanced in Mordhau. Indeed, there have been range weapons in Chivalry that were unfair not only for melee players, but archers using other weapons as well. And the same thing is currently true for Mordhau. But you may ask what sort of ranged weapons should not exist in slasher titles. Well, as someone who is very experienced in archery and somewhat experienced in dealing with archers as a melee class in Chivalry, I believe I am more than capable of suggesting fair and balanced range system. So the first thing we will have a look at is projectile speed. Chivalry's crossbows come to mind when I think about a weapon that's high in this department. I don't think anyone from the EU competitive scene can deny that the most successful archers in the scene happen to be crossbowmen. Coincidence or something more? Because you see, it isn't just the competitive scene. If you hopped onto any average TO server and looked at who the top archer was on the scoreboard, chances are that archer was a crossbowman. I've had a few occasions where your average public player would toy with me before killing me like I'm nothing. And people who don't even play archer have been known to pick up crossbows and dominate with them no problem. Clearly, there is something wrong here. It should be obvious to anyone that the faster a projectile is, the less you have to lead generally and the less time an opponent has to avoid it. This is why you are more likely to hit your target at any given range when the projectile speed factor increases. When you couple this with a high damage output for each shot, making consecutive shots on target less necessary, it's easy to see why archers don't have a hard time being successful with them, while bowmen can train really hard and still not be able to pull off the same feats. One of the more common ad hoc excuses you'll hear in defense of this is, you can't get as close to your targets due to lack of mobility, therefore a higher projectile speed is needed. Which I can tell you is complete nonsense. What you see here is plenty of examples from myself and other archers who are able to get about as close as the effective range of a short bow. Enemy melee players will often be too preoccupied with your teammates to use throwables against you, and even archers that use, say, a short bow will have difficulty hitting you if you turn your Provice shield to them constantly while reloading, since unlike crossbows they have a lot of projectile drop to account for. And since crossbows have a higher projectile speed and damage, you'll have an easier time killing them than they will you. Even if it was true that crossbow archers can't get as close, being able to maintain more range while having only as much difficulty hitting targets as a short bowman at close range has significant advantages which close range archers pretty much can't deal with. For instance, you can be out of sight for as long as you choose to be, and since targets won't know where or when you will shoot them, they will become more predictable for you. Archers using closer range weapons like the short bow won't be able to hit you due to their slower projectile speed, and you aren't as screwed if your team gets wiped out because you have the range to easily fall back into your next wave of teammates. In Mordhau, the longbow is ridiculously unfair for the same reasons Chivalry's crossbows are, except it might actually be worse because of the Huntsman perk basically making archers that use any other weapon or perk setup essentially screwed the moment your average longbowman enters the scene. You see here I get cut short of doing any significant damage way too often due to the same longbow archer. And when I try to use the recurve bow, you will find that at best I'm only able to get off 3 quick shots before I die. This isn't an isolated incident. Getting 30 or more deaths due mostly to longbows hasn't exactly been an uncommon experience for me. It's clear that this weapon needs some drastic changes in order to be fair for other weapons. There's basically nothing a recurve archer can do against a longbowman at long range, and even at close range, they're deadly as hell. All it takes is one hit tray for them to end everything for me. Melee players can't close the distance easily on them due to the ranges the longbow allows a player to be at, because as mentioned before, they can easily fall back into another wave of teammates. Now on to the next point, which is fire rate. Unlike what a certain archer will tell you, high fire rate weapons are perfectly fine and can in fact be the most skill based weapons to use where raw aiming skill is concerned. However, the main thing that makes them skillful is the fact that you have to land consecutive shots on target in order to kill them, which in turn justifies a higher fire rate. When you combine this fire rate with high damage, as was the case with javelins and chivalry but also throwables and Mordhau, it becomes the complete opposite. When all you have to do is spam projectiles for one-hit kills, all it takes for them to get lucky and hit you once. With something like the short bow, however, you had to concentrate on being consistent with each shot even with the high fire rate you possessed, because sometimes not even 3 body shots will kill a target. Javelins and chivalry were definitely the easiest weapon to use in the game because of this fact, and it seems a similar thing is true with Mordhau's throwables. Whilst high damage weapons can be a thing in the game, the way to balance them out is to make sure that the more powerful the weapon is, the slower its fire rate, and the less powerful a weapon is, the faster its fire rate. As mentioned before, make sure the projectile speed of high damage weapons isn't taken to a ridiculous degree either. Another thing people will do in defense of the weapons they use is post a few cherry-picked clips of them using other weapons in an attempt to show that either they are proficient with them as well, or even that it is actually what you use that is easy or unfair. JP and his fanboys often try this with me, but using these clips as proof that the short bow is easy or that he is proficient with other weapons is about as stupid as me using these clips to prove that melee is easy or that I'm better at it than Stouty. It ignores the bigger picture of consistency almost entirely, because what consistency shows is that Stouty can beat me more often than I can him, and likewise, consistency has shown crossbowmen being more successful than bowmen. The final thing I would like to say on balancing ranged has nothing to do with tweaking the weapons, but actually the movement speed of the players generally. I've noticed in Mordhau that projectile speeds are generally higher, which means I have an easier time hitting targets compared to chivalry, even with something like the recurve bow. A slight increase in movement speed should help in making sure melee players can dodge arrows and close the distance more easily, and increase the challenge for the archers. Oh, and making tier 3 armor invulnerable to projectiles is a bad idea, because that will just ensure that archery is completely useless. I mean, what reason would melee players have not to use tier 3 at that point? We need to make it so archery is challenging to be successful with, but not impossible simply because of a player's loadout. Anyway, there are my suggestions. Be sure to leave your opinions in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next episode where we'll discuss whatever other issue comes to my mind.